this video, I want to explain the missional living ladder. Now, before I get into this, I want to do a few prefaces that I've written down. The first preface is that this is a tool, not a rule. So a lot of times, Eric and I share things to the church and to huddles and huddle leaders that some people have accused us of being legalistic about, or like adding things to Scripture that aren't there. And we want to be so faithful to Scripture. We want to be so faithful to making disciples. A lot of the things we talk about, whether it's Way 6 or Missional Living Ladder or D4 Square, they're not rules to be followed, they're tools to be used. And so that applies to this as much as anything. We're not trying to be legalistic or force people to do ministry or make disciples a certain way. This is just a tool that might help you as you follow in obedience to Christ and what it means to make disciples. So that's my preface number one. Preface number two is that this tool should never be used to manipulate people, right? This isn't so that we can get an edge. This isn't so that we can take advantage of people or get people to do something or have conversations that they don't want to have. This is, again, a tool to be able to help us if we have trouble getting to the point where we can have gospel conversations with our friends and family. So this is not to be used or to be viewed as a form of manipulation or to use people. It's a tool. It's just something to help you grow in the way you converse with people and the way you interact with people. So that's my second preface. My third preface is that if this isn't helpful, then just don't use it. If this seems too complicated, if this puts on too much pressure, if you're like, I have a different method, or I engage people with the gospel in other ways, that's fine. There's no like rule that this has to be done this way or that you have to use this tool. If it's not helpful, just don't use it, and that's completely okay. What I would encourage you, though, is that you should be engaging your friends and family with the gospel. You should be having gospel conversations. So if you find yourself in a rut and just not knowing how to get there, this might be something for you to consider using or trying to see if it helps you develop as somebody that gets to gospel conversations. I guess lastly is that just like anything, when you start out in the practice mode, sometimes it feels very mechanical, but eventually that morphs into something that feels very natural. And I would say this tool applies as well, that mechanically, it can maybe even feel awkward at first, but eventually this can become a very natural thing that you're not even using the tool, the missional living ladder. You're just kind of progressing your conversations to gospel conversations, and it's just something that happens naturally. So this might be a tool to help you practice, but not something that you use long term. My last preface is that this wasn't originally ours. We adopted this from Resonate Church, and I think they called it the Missional Living Wheel, and theirs was a little bit different. Theirs was a wheel, ours is a ladder. I'll explain why in a minute. And I think Resonate might have adopted it from 3DM Ministries, but I don't know that for sure. I wanted to make the disclaimer, though, that we didn't invent this completely. If somebody ends up seeing this video and saying, hey, you stole that from us, we're trying to give credit where credit is due. I'm just not entirely sure where this originated. So with that, let's jump over to the actual tool. So here we have the actual missional living ladder tool. And the idea is this. We have different conversation levels that you can see here. And the idea is that different people in your life are in different levels of conversation. So level 1, and there's going to be 4 levels, is general conversation. So this is the idea that a lot of the people that you interact with, you're really just at a very general level, right? You talk about things like the weather. You talk about things like, just very, how's your day, but not really wanting to know how's your day. It's a very general, generic type conversation level. And over here in this column is helpful notes. We say that you see people as scenery, machinery, or ministry, right? Every person you come in contact with, you see as either scenery, machinery, or ministry. And what we mean by that is some people you come in contact with are just scenery. They're just part of your route, part of the route of your day, right? If you go to the grocery store and you're checking out and you see somebody in the aisle and they're just, there's the can of foods, there's the display, and there's that person, and you just walk right on by and you just don't see that person at all because they're just part of their scenery, right? They're nothing. Or machinery, maybe the checker at that same grocery store is like, they're not a person to you. They're just the person that checks out your groceries. They're a tool, right? There's the scanner, there's the conveyor belt, and there's the checker, and the person's just a part of the machine that's going on, right? So we don't want to view people as like just scenery that's passing through our life, like going back the rear view mirror. We don't want to see people as machinery, like people that we don't want to just see people as things that we use to get what we want. We want to view people as ministry. It's like every single person, every single conversation is an opportunity to do ministry. And certainly that's how Jesus has viewed it, right? He was always doing ministry to all the people around him, and especially the people that were in his life and in close relationship with him. So the first thing is like, a helpful tool is, are you viewing people, like if you're not ever getting to gospel conversations, if you're not ever really engaging people with the gospel, it might be because you're not even viewing people as anything besides scenery or machinery, right? You're not viewing them as ministry. And so the idea is, level 1 conversations are okay. And sometimes it's okay to have a simple level 1 conversation where you're just like, how's your day? Or let's talk about the weather, or when the sports team that won or lost last night, or whatever. Like those kind of conversations are okay, but they're what we call level 1 conversations. They're the lowest level of conversation, and it takes a long time to get from there to a gospel conversation. So sometimes when you first meet somebody, it's okay to live in that space. I like puppies. You like puppies. Look at that. We have something in common, like level 1 type stuff. But eventually you want to get to level 2 conversations. So this is significant conversations, right? We want to get to the place with people where we're figuring out like significant things about their life, about who they are as a person, about what they think about things. A helpful note is to remember 4. Future, occupation, upbringing, relationships. To have these types of conversations, you want to ask questions. So a good question is like, where do you want to be in 10 years? When you ask that question, it's not like, oh, the weather's nice outside today. It's not a general topic. It's deep. It's like they're revealing to you their hopes, their dreams, their aspirations, their challenges, right? What they're looking to in the future. So asking questions about the future, asking questions about their occupation could be good as well. Like, what do you do for work? What do you do for hobbies? How do you spend your time, right? This is getting more to a deeper level of who this person is. Their upbringing. This is a great one to ask, like, tell me about your parents. What was it like growing up? Where did you grow up, right? All these sorts of questions just elevate the relationship from, okay, we're talking about the weather and pleasantries, to now we're actually getting to know each other, right? And I even find for myself, like, I'm very comfortable in general conversation, right? I'm very comfortable not going deep and just talking to people about the weather, talking to people about sports or video games, or these like very simple things that don't take any emotional investment or involvement. To hit this level 2 is really to say, I want to be emotionally involved and invested in learning who you are as a person. And so it could be other questions that aren't on this list, but that's just a again, it's a tool to help you take a conversation to the next level. So if you're in class and you're trying to be missional to the person sitting next to you, and all you've talked about so far is the class and homework and the weather and all the general stuff, maybe before class starts, you ask them about their upbringing. You ask them if they grew up in the area, those sorts of questions. You ask them what degree are they seeking? What job do you hope to get? All those sorts of questions. Get to know the person at a deeper level. So it kind of moves you up the ladder, if you will, from general to level 2. And this is a big part of it, is just like, stop seeing people as scenery and machinery and start seeing people as ministry opportunities, like opportunities to eventually share the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And once you start viewing people that way, you want to get to know them more because you want to be able to have the relational rapport to be able to have a real conversation. So the next level 3 conversations, is spiritual. Okay, this is moving, again, not necessarily to like a gospel conversation per se, but moving into the realm of like spiritual things and significant things. So not just your upbringing, but like values, purpose, and worldviews, right? So these are sorts of questions you want to ask people. Like one of my favorite questions I always like to ask people is like, did you grow up going to church? Right? That's a simple question. It's non-invasive. Most people are okay answering it. And they'll either say, yes, I went to this church or that church, or no, I wasn't religious, or my grandma took me to church once in a while, or like all kinds of different, opinion, or all kinds of different answers will come out of that if you just ask, did you go to church when you were growing up? And what ends up happening as well is that people usually volunteer more information about that, right? Like, oh yeah, I went to church every week when I was a kid and I loved it until I was about 12. And for whatever reason, my parents moved and we stopped going, right? Well, now they love church, but they stopped going to church when they were 12. And that's a huge piece of spiritual information that helps you know that person and where that person's at. Right? It's often really cool to ask about like jewelry or tattoos because things that people wear are often super meaningful to them. So if you see somebody that has like a cross tattoo or a verse tattoo, and ask anybody about their tattoo, and people usually love to share about that. And it's significant. It's almost always deep and at a spiritual level. Like, hey, I saw, what's that tattoo say on your arm? Can you tell me about it? Like people want to share that part of themselves with you, usually, right? Not always. And a lot of times it gets almost to that spiritual level. So anything values, purpose, worldview, even asking questions like, do you believe in God? That's not shoving the gospel down their throat. That's not you even sharing what you believe about God. You just want to know if they believe about God, what they believe about God. Like, so you're having lunch with a coworker and you're at the lunch table and you're just like, hey, I was just wondering if you believe in God. And just see what they say. Like, oh yeah, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, or no, I don't believe in God, or I'm agnostic, I don't really know what to believe about God, or any number of other things, right? Like, who knows what people are going to say or what people are thinking until you ask the questions. And that's kind of the purpose of this, right? Again, move past scenery or machinery, view people as ministry, get to know them, ask about their upbringing, their future, their hopes, their dreams, their origin story, get to know them for real, and then get into the deeper stuff, this level 3, the worldview, the religious history, all those sorts of things. And again, we're not even having a gospel conversation at this point, meaning that we're not sharing with them the gospel of salvation, saying like, well, that's eventually what we want to do, right? Is we want to share like what we believe about God and the truth and how to be saved and how to be redeemed from sin and all those sorts of things. But usually it takes a lot of questions before you can get to that point and a lot of genuine interest about who a person is. And so asking people questions and moving up the ladder helps so much. And that gets you to your fourth level, the gospel conversation. This is the goal, right? If like we want to be wise with our time, we want to be wise with our relationships, we want to share the good news of the gospel and how it's transformed our life and how it can transform their life too. And so, helpful notes, I just put creation, fall, redemption, restoration. This is the gospel story, right? This is now, okay, it's a little bit less to the question asking and more to, I want to share my heart. And so you might start with a question like, is it all right? Has anybody ever shared like the Christian gospel with you? Or would it be all right if I shared the gospel with you? Or just like, oh, that's, again, building off conversation. Let me tell you what I believe about the Bible. I believe the Bible, and then boom, go into a gospel share. I believe the Bible teaches that in the beginning, God created man and woman without sin, but man rebelled. And when man rebelled, the whole world fell into sin. That's fall, right? And then Jesus came so that, we wouldn't have to live in our sinful state forever. He died on the cross to take the penalty for our sin. And when he took the penalty for our sin, he also offered to give us his righteousness so that we could be in relationship with God. That's redemption and restoration, that we would, because now we're in right relationship with God, I know that I get to live with him forever in an eternal kingdom where Jesus is king, right? That's restoration, that God is making things right. And that's such a very brief gospel example, I probably should do another video, an entire video on like, what is the gospel and how do I share it? And, what's a 1-minute version versus a 5-minute version, and incorporating my story into it. Lots to say about like how to share the gospel. This video, I want to more emphasize how to get up to that level of conversation, right? So again, if you find yourself, one thing is, so there's a couple notes here. One thing is, you may be the kind of person that like just doesn't talk to people at all, right? That's okay. But you should practice, right? And just practice on level 1 general stuff. If you're the kind of person that just doesn't really talk to people at all, the best place to start is general conversation, right? If you don't generally talk to people or like having conversations with people at all, don't just jump right into a gospel conversation. I mean, I guess you can. I mean, if the Spirit is leading you to do that, just do that, like be obedient, right? But if you're trying to wade into like, I want to share the gospel, but I barely even talk to people, I don't know where to begin. Begin right here at general conversations, right? Just start asking people or talking about the weather. Nice day outside, isn't it? Oh yeah, it is a nice day. How you doing? Oh, I'm doing great, thanks. How are you doing? Oh, I'm doing pretty well. Just have that, just start practicing that little banter, the little side conversations that happen. That's a great place to start with people, right? And if you've been viewing people, especially like the barista that gives you your coffee every morning, if you've been viewing her or him as machinery, and every day she's like, that'll be $4.50, and you give her the money, you take the coffee, thank you, and you leave, start with a general conversation and say, oh, I like your pin. Oh, I like, I appreciate you giving me my coffee every morning. Like, thank you so much. Like, whatever, just start the general conversation at level 1 and practice that and live there until you're comfortable, right? So again, or maybe you're already really comfortable there, right? I think I find myself in the rut when I'm being lazy is I can just live in general conversation all the time with my students or my coworkers or whatever. Like sometimes I don't want to make the emotional effort to get to know people more, right? So for me, I need to kind of like be disciplined to move conversations to level 2. And so that's just a really question asking, right? Asking good questions to get to know people at a deeper level. And so use this to kind of like just figure out where people are. Now, this is an actual document, so you could put names in this if you wanted to. Say like Bob and Sally and Jane or whatever, right? So you could put names in here and say, oh, these 3 people are people in my life, but I've really only had general conversations with them. John, and I've had a significant conversation with, and with Eric, I've actually had spiritual conversations, right? So you kind of can put different people in different categories, and it shows you where the different people are on this ladder as you kind of climb them up to a gospel conversation. And so you might say, okay, well, next time I see Bob, I don't want to talk about football like we always talk about. Next time I see Bob, I want to ask him about his parents. So that way I can move Bob up to here. And next time I see John, well, me and John grew up together, so I know him deeply, but we've never really talked about church stuff. I know he went to, the Mormon church, on and off. I wonder where he's at with that. Next time I see John, I want to talk to him about how does he feel about the Mormon church these days? So you have that conversation, then you move John up like that, right? And again, we're not shoving the gospel down John's throat. We're just asking him how he feels about the Mormon church because you knew he grew up in the Mormon church. Right? And then maybe from there you say, okay, I had that conversation with him. Now I want to actually tell John what I think about the gospel. And now I've moved John up to gospel conversation. So it's just, again, you can put actual names in here and see where you're at with people, whether they're people on your way 6 or just people in your life or whatever the case may be. And so that's why you've got it kind of set up as a spreadsheet here. You can print this out actually and write in names. Think about the 12 people that you spend the most time with. That's a good place to start. The 12 people maybe you spend the most time with, and just put their names on there. And if you find that there's a bunch of names in general, kind of make yourself uncomfortable and start having some significant conversations. Or you may have a lot of significant conversations. See if you can get up to like more spiritual level. Or maybe people already know you're a Christian and you have spiritual conversations all the time. Maybe just work that up even more and be like, hey, have I ever told you what I believe about the Bible? Have I ever told you what I believe about Jesus? Have I ever told you how my life has been changed, by the gospel? Like just those types of questions. It's still asking them to like allow you to have the conversation, but it's not so invasive, right? And if they say no, that's okay, right? You don't need to shove any of this down people's throat. It's just a tool to try and move people from general conversations to gospel conversations, right? Another thing I wanted to say was like, how long should this take? Well, it depends. It so depends. With people that this is how I do it, right? With people that I know that I have a long relationship with, so like a lot of times my coworkers, I'd let this process be very slow. It's okay for me, like when I know that I'm going to be working with somebody for 1, 2, 3 or more years, like maybe a long time, I'm not going to necessarily rush to a gospel conversation within the first day or week of meeting a person, right? I might live in general and significant conversation for a year, right? Or 2 years even, like just playing the long games. Like, I really want to get to know you. I want to have a relationship with you. I want you to feel known by me. I want me to feel known by you, right? Like I want there to be a level of safety here. And then I'll move to spiritual. And I might just take a lot of time to have spiritual conversations with people and like ask them what they believe and figure out where they're at, because all of that information, it will help eventually then when I have the gospel conversation. But then sometimes, I'll find out like, oh, this coworker is going to be moving on. I might accelerate that process, right? I might accelerate that process and say, I want to share the gospel with this person before they move. I need to not be so slow. I need to move up the ladder, right? The other thing is that this can all happen in the course of one conversation. So like when we do campus evangelism, or if you're just in a very evangelistic mode, sometimes you meet somebody and like within the first couple of minutes, it's general conversation. So it's like, oh, how you doing? Are you enjoying the sun today? Yeah, that's great. Oh, I'm glad you're enjoying the sun. What's your major? Boom, now we've moved from 1 to 2. Oh, you're an accounting major and you want to get a job later? That's cool. That's cool. And then you maybe jump straight to worldview and say like, we're talking to people about Jesus today. I was wondering, do you believe in Jesus? Right? Again, it's not a gospel conversation. It's just asking them if they believe in Jesus. But we've moved from 1 to 2 to 3 within the course of a conversation now. And they say, oh, no, I don't really believe in Jesus, but I believe in God or something like that. Right? You say, oh, okay, that's really great. Can I tell you, is it all right if I share with you what I believe about Jesus? Boom. Now we're to conversation 4 or conversation level 4. So you could move all the way up the ladder in one conversation with somebody you just met, right? I think that does probably take a little bit more boldness, probably takes a little bit more practice, but it's still a great way to go like to build to that gospel conversation rather than just like jumping straight into it. But my point in that is to say that, this missional living ladder could be something that plays out over the course of time, or it could be something that plays out over the course of a conversation, right? And either way is completely fine. And again, it's a tool to get you used to like taking conversations to the next level. And I guess that's the biggest thing I'd want you to walk away from with all this is like, wherever you're at, try to take conversations to the next level. Ultimately, we want to share the gospel, and we're not all bold and be able to do that easily, and that's okay. Like, we're all growing in this. But if you're just constantly saying, like, I'm going to try and move from one level to the next level to the next level, that's really the goal. So hopefully this has been helpful. If you have questions, like definitely reach out to me or Pastor Eric, and we'd love to answer your questions about any of this stuff.